going to go over the technology of study. This is from the Scientology Handbook, based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard. It's a big book, right? And it's chapter 1. Chapter 1, and you can find it on page 2. Perfect. Let's begin. So let's go ahead and we're going to read page 2. It says this. Consider this for a moment. In all your schooling, did anyone ever teach you how to study something? Today, people are graduating school unable to read or write at a level adequate to hold a job or deal with life. It is a huge problem. It is not that subjects cannot be learned. What isn't taught is how to learn. It is the missing step in all education. L. Ron Hubbard filled this gaping hole by supplying the first and only technology of how to study. He discovered the laws on which learning is based and developed workable methods for anyone to apply. He called this subject study technology. Pretty interesting, huh? This technology provides an understanding of the basics of learning and supplies exact ways to overcome all the pitfalls one can encounter during study. Study technology is not speed reading or memory tricks. Again, this is very, very common in school, in the education system today. These have not been proven to raise one's ability to comprehend what was studied or to raise literacy. Study technology shows how one studies in order to comprehend the subject so one can apply it. Contained herein is only a small portion of the entire body of study technology developed by Mr. Hubbard. Regardless, this brief overview contains fundamentals which you can use to study more effectively. With this technology, any subject can be learned by anyone. So what we're about to read is why study, right? We're about to just go over this. I won't read the whole entire thing, but I wanted to read you that one portion because I think that is very, very key. This other thing is this other section is called why study. So with all the emphasis placed on education in our society, it is remarkable to realize that there has never been an actual technology of study or a technology of education. That sounds very far-fetched, but it is true. There was a school technology, but it didn't have too much to do with education. It consisted of the technology of how you go to school, how you get taught, and how you get examined, but there was no actual technology of education or study. Lacking such a technology, people find it difficult to achieve their goals. Knowing how to study is vitally important to anyone. So like if you didn't know how to study, you wouldn't be able to grasp the information you needed in your life in order to apply it and get better in your own purpose in life and your own field of expertise and so on and so forth. If you're in school, you should understand that using this technology for study, it does improve your test scores only because you are more certain and more knowledgeable about it. Nobody's having you remember things. Nobody's tricking you. There's no memory tricks. There's no nothing. You are studying to apply, not to memorize. That's the thing you need to understand. Now, let's go ahead and just touch on this point because we kind of get into this when we go into school. I mean, I've personally been in high school. I was recently in high school, you know? I graduated, but here's the thing. We all have to get through this one barrier because I see a lot of my former classmates that have gone through this many times over, and probably you have too. It's the first little gate that has to be opened to embark upon study is the willingness to know. So you want to know something, you want to learn something, right? If that gate remains closed, then one is liable to get into such things as a total memorized, word for word system of education, which will not result in the gain of any knowledge. Such a system only produces graduates who can possibly parrot back facts, but without any real understanding or ability to do anything with what they have been taught. So there we go. Again, you have to be willing to learn. It cannot be forced upon you, because otherwise you won't learn anything, and then you'll just be into making that grade happen, but you won't get anything out of what you just learned. Okay, so that's just like 2 paragraphs from this. For what purpose then does one study? Well, until you clarify that, you cannot make an intelligent activity out of it. Some students study for the examination. The student is thinking to himself, how will I repeat this back when I'm asked a certain question? Or how will I pass the examination? That is complete folly, but unfortunately is what many students have done in a university. Again, university, high school, so on and so forth, wherever you are a student of, whether it be an academy, whether it be an elementary school, you should understand this is the technology of study. You have to be willing to understand. You have to be willing to you have to be willing to understand, even basically after having the willingness to want to study, to want to understand. So you have to have that willingness. You do. You have to. Otherwise, you're not gonna get anything out of it, and there's not going to be any application because there's no point in studying. Here's an example. Take the man who has been building houses for a long time, who one day gets an assistant who has just been trained in the university to build houses. He goes mad. The academically trained man has been studying it for years, yet knows nothing about it. And the practical man doesn't know why this is. See, so you can't go in and actually apply what you've learned because you haven't learned anything if you're just memorizing. So if somebody tells you what you learned and you can't relay that information to that person, well, you don't remember anything because you probably didn't really have the willingness to educate yourself on it. Probably even just memorized it just for the exam, but didn't do it for yourself because you're the one that's actually studying it, not the examiner. Not your teacher, not the examiner, not anybody. Now, I run into this a lot, and I wanted to touch on this subject here, and it's the student who knows all about it. Okay, this is on page 4 of the Scientology Handbook. It says this. On the subject of learning itself, the first datum to learn and the primary obstacle to overcome is you cannot study a subject if you think you know all about it to begin with. A student who thinks he knows all there is to know about a subject will not be able to learn anything in it. A person might already be familiar with a subject from previous experience and, having had success in that field, now has the idea that he knows all about it. If such a person then took a course in that subject, he would be studying through a screen of "I know all about this," quote unquote. With that obstacle in the way, one can become completely bogged down in his studies and not make forward progress, meaning that if you already think you know all about it, you already have that idea, there's no point in studying, right? Wrong. You have to get that idea out of your head. There is a point in studying. We don't know everything about it. There's always room for improvement. This is true for a student of any subject. If one can decide that he does not already know everything about a subject and can say to himself, here is something to study, let's study it, he can overcome this obstacle and be able to learn. Just changing your mindset. This is a very, very important datum for any student. If he understands this and applies it, the gateway to knowledge is wide open to him. So again, change your mindset. Maybe you don't know everything about that subject. There's always room for improvement, right? That's correct, right? So barriers to study is the next one, page 5, Scientology Handbook. Same topic, the technology of study. Barriers to study. Being a successful student requires more than just a willingness to learn. However, pitfalls do exist, and students must know how to effectively learn in order to overcome them. It has been discovered that there are 3 definite barriers which can block a person's ability to study, and thus his ability to be educated. These barriers actually produce different sets of physical and mental reactions. If one knows and understands what these barriers are and how to handle them, his ability to study and learn will be greatly increased. So the first barrier is absence of mass. Okay, so in study technology, we refer to the mass and the significance of a subject. By mass, we mean the actual physical objects, the things of life. The significance of a subject is the meaning or ideas or theory of it, right? So like the Sharpie, that's a physical object, that's mass. So if you were to not know what a Sharpie is, you need to feel the object. You need to actually see it for yourself. How does the Sharpie work? See, it's a marker, right? So the Sharpie is here. You can actually see it. You can actually feel it and look at it and observe it for yourself. Okay? Education attempted in the absence of mass, in which the technology will be involved, is hard on a subject, hard on a student. Excuse my French. Let me say that again. Education attempted in the absence of the mass in which the technology will be involved is hard on a student. Okay, so the absence of this, if you were studying Sharpies and you didn't know what a Sharpie was, you wouldn't understand it. Again, we're going to continue on here. If you were studying about tractors, the mass would be a tractor. You could study a textbook all about tractors, how to operate the controls, the different types of attachments, and that can be used. In other words, all the significance. But can you imagine how little you would understand if you had never actually seen a tractor? I mean, if you were really studying about Sharpies, if you were studying about tripods, right? If you were studying about a tripod and you didn't know what a tripod was, you wouldn't know that it has bendable legs. You wouldn't know that it has this that pivots. You wouldn't know all of that, you know? You wouldn't know the brands that are out there. You wouldn't know what the kind of feet, plastic, rubbery feet they have and stuff, you know? You wouldn't know that. You have to actually have the thing in your space, be able to experience it for yourself. Such an absence of mass can actually make a student feel squashed. It can make him feel bent, sort of dizzy, sort of dead, bored, exasperated. Right? Cool. Photographs or motion pictures can be helpful because they represent a promise or hope of the mass. But if one is studying about tractors, the printed page and the spoken word are not a substitute for an actual tractor. So if you cannot find that object in your immediate environment, or you can't just go experience it yourself, you know, if you're studying about skydiving and you can't just go do it right now, not many people can, then what you do is you go and look up a video on skydiving. Maybe somebody's talking about skydiving. Maybe there's a picture of skydiving. Look up the definition of a skydiving. Maybe there's a picture with it in the dictionary, you know? Educating a person in a mass that he does not have and which is not available can produce some uncomfortable and distracting physical reactions. So the guy's going to be lost, going to be very, very confused. Very uncomfortable, doesn't really understand what you're talking about. If you're talking about a Sharpie and you haven't given him a Sharpie yet, he's going to be uncomfortable. He's not going to really understand why you're talking to him about it. If you were trying to teach someone all about tractors, but you did not show him any tractors or let him experience the mass of a tractor, he would wind up with a face that felt squashed, with headaches and with his stomach feeling funny. He would feel dizzy from time to time, and often his eyes would hurt. Interesting, huh? His eyes would hurt, right? His eyes would hurt. If he didn't see this and he didn't know what the hell it was, then going through all of that, he would feel dizzy from time to time, and often his eyes would hurt. Students of any age can run into this barrier. Let us say that little Johnny is having an awful time at school with his arithmetic. You find out that he had an arithmetic problem that involved apples, but he never had any apples on his desk to count. Get him some apples and give each one of them a number. Now he has a number of apples in front of him. There is no longer a theoretical number of apples. It's all physical. If you gave me one if you give me one pen and didn't have another pen, well, you got to give him a lot of mass. You got to give the person a lot of physical objects with that in mind, you know? The point is that you could trace Johnny's problem back to an absence of mass and remedy it by supplying the mass. Or you could supply an object or a reasonable substitute. Picture, video, um, anything. Anything that will give you that mass. Physical object or a representation of it. This barrier to study, the studying of something without its mass ever being around, produces these distinctly recognizable reactions. So there it is. There's that, right? So there's many different ways in this book that it goes over more about how you can demonstrate things with objects, like if you were to make up a math problem and you had no clue about how many objects that you're doing, like let's say there's like 1 plus 1, right? So you take an object and you go 1 plus 1, right? Or if you were to go, okay, cool, well, I have an argument with my friend, and and you're trying to demonstrate that out. You're trying to demonstrate how you would work that or how it's actually come about or whatever. You go, okay, cool. So point A, so I'm going to call this Johnny. Johnny's upset with his mom, and his mom has said this to him, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. But you would demonstrate that to give you mass of the situation in a physical form. So there's that. The second barrier is too steep a gradient. A gradient is a gradual approach to something taken step by step, level by level, each step or level being of itself easily attainable, so that finally complicated and difficult activities can be achieved with relative ease. The term gradient also applies to each of the steps taken in such an approach. When one hits too steep a gradient in studying a subject, a sort of confusion or reelingness, a state of mental swaying or unsteadiness results. This is the second barrier to study. This is actually an interesting one, because if you've ever went out and fixed your car, and instead of reading the instruction manual or reading a manual that will help you, or watching a video on YouTube, whatever, and wherever you're going to get the data, what would happen if you didn't read all the information and then it just skipped all the way to you skipped all the way to rebuilding an engine and didn't even know? So see, all of a sudden you're like, what the heck? So then it's when one hits too steep a gradient in studying a subject, a sort of confusion or reelingness, a state of mental swaying or unsteadiness results. Okay? Then what you do when you run through that, when you run up against that and you skip a gradient and you go too steep, the remedy for that is to cut back the gradient. Find out when the person was not confused about what he was studying, then find out what new action he undertook. Find out what he felt he understood well just before he got all confused. Okay, so you're not feeling confused when you're reading the instruction manual, right? You're like, oh, cool, okay, cool, I understand all of this. That's good information to have, right, or whatever. That's a good gradient to have, because you're reading something, you're trying to understand it. You don't just go from reading like a part of this to rebuilding your engine without knowing what to do. Because then you go, whoa, 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 right? So you don't really understand. So there. So don't skip a gradient. Go back to where you felt not confused. and where you felt good, and then go ahead and go from there and go up the gradients. You will discover that there is something in this area. The part he felt he understood well, which he did not really understand. When this is cleared up, the student will be able to progress again. When a person is found to be terribly confused on the second action he was supposed to know or do, it is safe to assume that he never really understood the first action. This barrier is most recognizable and most applicable when engaged in doing this, performing some action or activity, as opposed to just academic or intellectual study. Again, this barrier is most recognizable and most applicable when engaged in doing this. Doing this, the action of doing something, the action of taking action, doing something, moving, doing it, making it happen, pushing the bike that you're riding, touching the car, moving parts in the car, doing something to give you more certainty on that subject, give you more certainty on the thing that you are trying to achieve. Now, here is the third and most important barrier. It's called the misunderstood word. Again, the misunderstood word. The third and most important barrier to study is the misunderstood word. A misunderstood word is a word which is not understood or wrongly understood. An entirely different set of physical reactions can occur when one reads past words he does not understand. Going on past a word that was not understood gives one a distinctly blank feeling or a washed out feeling. Okay, so let's go over that again. Going on past a word that was not understood, meaning that if I told you a really long word that you had never defined before in your life, and I just told you that, and you went past it without telling me or without looking it up for yourself in a dictionary, you would get a blank feeling, or you'd get a washed out feeling. You feel like, oh man, what the, you'd be all confused. You wouldn't duplicate that, right? You wouldn't understand it. You wouldn't have certainty, and so on and so forth. It says a not there feeling in a sort of nervous hysteria, excessive anxiety can follow that. So again, there's two others right there. You'd feel not there, and you get excessive anxiety based on that. The confusion or inability to grasp or learn comes after a word that the person did not have defined or understood. Okay, so it comes after, meaning that if you have no clue what you just read, go find out where you were last doing well and go find that word and define it, and then reread from there, right? So it says the misunderstood word is much more important than the other two barriers. Okay, it's much more important, see? The misunderstood word establishes aptitude and lack of aptitude. This is what psychologists have been trying to test for years without recognizing what it was. So again, psychologists have been trying to figure out what this is, and Mr. Hubbard found it out. And here it is. This is all that many study difficulties go back to. Studying past misunderstood words produces such a vast range of mental effects that it itself is the prime factor involved with stupidity and many other unwanted conditions. Okay, interesting. Stupidity, on other unwanted conditions, you wouldn't understand them, right? Okay, so if a person didn't have misunderstood words, his talents might or might not be present. But his doingness in that subject would be present. There are two specific phenomena which stem from misunderstood words. Cool, let's go over them. First is when a student misses understanding a word, the section right after that word is a blank in his memory. Let me read that again. When a student misses understanding a word, the section right after that word is a blank in his memory. Cool. So it's blank, right? Like you wouldn't understand, like you wouldn't remember. Like, wait, did I just read that? Kind of thing, right? You can always trace back to the word just before the blank, get it understood, and find miraculously that the former blank area is not now blank in the material you are studying. It is pure magic. Cool. So just understand that you'll experience that if you have a misunderstood word. So go to the misunderstood word and define it. Then you'd find that all of the words that you read before that, you remember for some reason. All of them, like it's like magic, right? Second phenomenon. A misunderstood definition or a not comprehended definition or an undefined word can even cause a person to give up studying a subject and leave a course or class. Leaving in this way is called a blow. Alrighty, so have you ever studied something in school which you had no clue why you were studying it and you lost interest in it and you left? I mean, I know I have in school, and I know that I had misunderstood words in it. So then I needed to go back into the class, go find out what I didn't understand, make that happen, and then I gained more interest in it again. It was really cool. So we have all known people who enthusiastically started on a course of study, only to find out sometime later that the person dropped the study because it was quote unquote boring, or quote unquote it wasn't what they thought it would be. They were going to learn a skill or go to night school and get their degree, but never followed through. No matter how reasonable their excuses, the fact is they dropped the subject or left the course. This is a blow. The person blows for only one primary reason: the misunderstood word. A person does not necessarily blow because of the other barriers to study, lack of mass, or too steep a gradient. These simply produce physical phenomena. But the misunderstood word can cause a student to blow. So you can just leave a course. You can literally leave a course, right? I mean, that's just how it goes, right? And you can leave a course and you can never come back to it. I mean, that is your choice, but here's the thing. You actually have a misunderstood word. You have no clue what you just read. Like if you didn't understand what I was talking about, you must have a misunderstood word somewhere in this video. So you have to figure out what I said. But if you do have that, this information is on volunteerministers.org and a free course on the technology of study. And this is the subject line of second phenomenon and the third and most important barrier, the misunderstood word. Okay, so if you do not understand what I'm talking about, you can reach out to me, or you can just study the material yourself and let me know if you have any questions. Perfect, right? Now, what I won't do is I won't go ahead and read you how to clear a word, because I want you to get that from the material, because I don't want to add my own opinions or beliefs or anything else into that data. I do want to show you one simple thing that I think you'd agree with, because I don't want to take from the Scientology Handbook, will take away from it. I want you to experience it yourself. So I'm pulling it up right now as we speak. I'm just going to show you the video. All right, guys, I'm going to share the video now. I'm going to share the screen. All right, here we go.
This. In all of the endless Consider this. In all of the endless hours of your schooling, you were given plenty to learn. But did anyone ever actually teach you how to study? Sure, you learned how to go to school, and maybe even what questions were going to be on the test. But were you ever taught how to learn? A lack of any real method of study has, over the years, led to many students studying just so they can pass the tests. Or trick methods of memorizing so they can repeat back the right answer when they're asked.
Abraham Lincoln.
And now and then, other more unconventional methods. But all of this is a substitute for actual understanding. You don't gain any real knowledge you can use. But study and learning are a vital part of everyday life, not just in terms of succeeding in your schooling, but in an ever more competitive world. Many people wish to advance their knowledge on the job. Or perhaps you've had a lifelong passion that you've always wanted to pursue. And as the years have passed, you've come to convince yourself that the subject is just too difficult. But the dream has never quite left you. And many people find themselves years after their actual schooling, needing to further their education so as to improve their situation in life. For any number of reasons, it's easy to see why it would be very useful to have an effective system of study. Scientology offers a precise study technology that enables anyone to learn and fully understand any subject. It's the first thoroughly workable approach to teaching people exactly how to learn. For example, one of the first steps of studying anything is knowing why you're studying. Instead of looking at data and thinking, is this going to be on the exam? Ask yourself this: how can I apply this material? How can I really use this? If you do that, you'll find you get much more out of what you're studying and be able to put what you're learning to actual use. Of course, you can't study a subject if you think you know all about it to begin with. Having a willingness to know includes deciding that there's something there to learn. In Scientology, it's been discovered that there are 3 distinct barriers which can block your ability to study, and therefore to learn. Each barrier actually produces a different set of reactions in you. If you can recognize these reactions, you can use specific tools to overcome them. If you've ever found yourself feeling bored or exasperated when studying something, or ever felt squashed, dizzy, headachy, or had that dead sort of feeling when trying to understand something, these are the reactions of the first barrier to study: the absence of mass. By mass, we mean the actual objects, the physical things of life. For example, if you were studying about flying from a textbook and read all about how to operate the controls, how much would you understand if you'd never actually seen an airplane cockpit itself? Seeing or touching the thing you're studying, getting the physical reality of the ideas you're trying to learn about would help remedy this.
One of the most important things that you want to
With study technology, you'll learn several useful tools developed specifically to give you the mass you need to make the thing you're studying real to you. If you've ever tried to learn something and found yourself reeling or confused, or feeling like the newest step you're asked to do is just too hard,
Come on, let's go.
this is actually because a previous step wasn't understood and you jumped to the next step. This second barrier to study is called too steep a gradient. Gradient means the gradual step-by-step approach to something. With these study tools, you'll know exactly how to find which earlier step it was that you missed or never quite mastered, and how to handle it. If you tackle what you're trying to learn so that each step is easily attainable, even the most complicated things can be achieved. Now, have you ever gotten to the end of a page and realized you have no idea what you just read? Or have you ever put down a book in the middle of it, never to pick it up again? Well, believe it or not, both of those scenarios are caused by the very same thing, and it's the most important barrier of them all, the misunderstood word. A misunderstood word is a word which is not understood at all, or it's a word you think you understand, but you have wrong. Going past a misunderstood word gives you a distinctly blank feeling. And if you've ever seen someone getting groggy or falling asleep over his book, then you know they've passed a misunderstood word long before. This also explains why you can get to the bottom of a page and not know what you just read. Somewhere earlier on that page, there was a word you misunderstood. When this occurs, the section right after that word is a blank in your memory. This causes you to separate yourself from it and withdraw. Any class you've dropped or subject you've ever given up on has had its misunderstood words. With study technology, you'll learn how to find those words and clear up their meaning. And you'll not only feel brighter, you'll regain your ability and interest in the subject. As simple as these tools seem at first glance, they represent extensive research into the subject of study and the way our minds work. In truth, being a bright student doesn't depend on native talent. No matter how young or old, or how impossible the challenge may at first seem, with these tools, anyone can learn any subject they choose and use those skills to succeed.
Alrighty, guys. Well, that was a good demonstration, good seminar. I'm going to end it there by saying, please do go ahead and check out the Scientology Handbook. If you cannot, by any chance, get the Scientology Handbook, go ahead and get the booklets. They're only $5, free shipping. Go to volunteerministers.org. Again, that's volunteerministers.org. Go find out for yourself and go ahead and check out their free courses. Thanks so much. This is Ryan Prescott at the Truth Movement. Go ahead and ask me any questions if you guys would like in the Facebook Messenger. Go ahead and check me out. I am on there. And yeah, thank you so much for attending, and I'll see you next time.